you so much for joining me on my program once again. I appreciate you wherever you're joining me from. I say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Accept my greeting according to your time zone. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please kindly subscribe to my channel. Click the notification bell so that you'll be notified each time I upload a video. You can be among the first to receive it. Then go to the comment section at all times. Leave your comment, drop your contribution. If you have suggestions, make it out there. If you have any criticism, put it down on the comment section. It will make us to get better, presenting you a better program. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My late mother used to say to me that all these things we keep hearing in television and radio, Bishop Kuka, and see how small he is. I tell her, I say, but now you born me. He said, no, you're small like this because you're supposed to have been two. I'm a twin, but my twin brother died at birth. So my mother used to say, because two of you are supposed to have come out. That's why, Your Excellency, the Honorable Commissioner for Education, Vice Chancellor, members of the Security Forces, Reverend Father, traditional rulers, parents, and the young people. As I was standing here and watching these young people, the thoughts were just going through my mind. And reminded of a rabbi who used to teach. And every time he came to the class, he would bow down before he starts teaching. And he repeated this so almost every blessed day, until one day one of the children had the courage to say, "You are our father, you are our teacher, you know more than us, and we are the ones who are supposed to. Why do you insist on bowing before us before you start teaching?" He said, "It's very simple. I'm bowing because I know that one of you could be president tomorrow. And if you become president, it will be on record that I already recognize you as president." When I saw a missed call from His Excellency, I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew that something must be amiss. Then next, I saw another call again from the Honorable Commissioner introducing herself. It's a long story, but I just want to say how honored I am. In a way, I was happy that the event was shifted, and when you shifted it and invited me, it made it easier for me, although the Honorable Commissioner must have been having all kinds of anxiety attacks. When it finally became clear that I could actually make this trip, I sent her a text, and she responded by telling me that today I've not been very well, but now that your text has come, I feel very well. Madam, thank you for your patience with me, but that is how chaotic my trip is. Your Excellency, I want to thank you for the honor, but anything to do with education, I will come running. I think it was the commissioner who was asking me last night, or maybe somebody with me in the car, was wondering whether I had ever been to Benin before. And I simply laughed, because I said jokingly, I came to Benin first before you were born. So this is not a new place to me. But I have very fond memories of this state, largely because of the great admiration that I had for Bendel State then. Not only Bendel Insurance, not only the great sportsmen and women, not only people like Isaac Ihoria. Indeed, when I saw this Alagodaro, I thought, are they trying to spell Igodalo? And they didn't spell it correctly. So, and then of course, your predecessor, Comrade Adam Soshimole, who we've always quarreled because he thought he was taller than me. But the last time I saw him, I said, "Oga, even after eating government food for 8 years, we are still about the same height." But comrade and I go back more than 40 years. But one of the things he harassed and harassed and harassed me to do was to be a member of the governing council of your university. And unfortunately, I couldn't make it. But as I said, I really want to commend your strides and how far you have traveled. I'm privileging education as the key and the guarantee of the future of our people and the world. Education, not only is it the leveler of society, it is the substitute for godfatherism, the substitute for nepotism, and the antidote to all that has held us back. I was here in Edo State, I think 3 years or so ago, with General Abdul Salam, the run-up to your final term. I was surprised to hear you say that your term is ending next year or so. So it's really a wonderful thing for me to be here. Why this celebration is significant and is so important, as I said, is its focus on education. And I commend your government for the decision to reinvent, to reposition, and to strategize about how the world must see the people of Edo State. Because all of us know very well, and in the last 20 or so years, if you mention Edo, you yourselves know what you became notorious for. So this great effort, in my view, is sufficiently worthy of commendation and appreciation, because it repositions your state to be able to compete effectively, efficiently in the 21st century. As we can see, our country is now being ravaged and threatened by the forces of darkness. Those who have said no to humanity and those who have said no to education, whether they manifest themselves in the excesses, the murderous excesses and the destructive excesses of Boko Haram, banditry, the people of darkness, that we must, as a country, fight with every drop of our blood to physically ensure that they are pushed back. Because without it, we have no future as a country. Not only have they destroyed the image of the country, they've destroyed the image of religion, they've made us victims and suspects. So really, no distance is too much for me to cover when it comes to education. The Holy Prophet of Islam is said to have said that we must all seek knowledge, even if it takes you to China. Because at that time, China was like the end of the world. So I'm just saying this in order to preface what I'm about to say. I personally, standing here, I'm a poster child of education. And I remain eternally grateful that I ended up as a priest of the Catholic Church. Because of its tradition, because of its focus in fulfilling the words of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who said, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. That church has been able to give me the quality of education that has taken me out of a community that up till today, if you go back to, if I take you to my village, you will not believe that this is where I was born. And up till today, many people who come to my village say to me, Bishop Kuka, is it where you were born? I say, yes. Those who are generous will say to me, after all you have done for Nigeria. I say, well, this is the fate the hand fate has dealt us. Because the first government presence, federal government presence in my community was when they brought the dead body of a young man from my village who died during the war. Motor that brought the dead body, that was federal government presence. Since then, up till today, there has been no other presence of the government, both federal and at state level, in my community. But I'm not here to lament, but I'm also saying that education has taken me to the tables of the rich, the high, and the mighty. Excuse me, I'm here more as an act of solidarity than to deliver a lecture, even though that's what I may end up doing. I have come from a far place. My story is also, in a way, a biography of every child. Because when I was growing up, then as now, we couldn't go to school because the schools were not there. We couldn't go to school because we didn't know anyone who had been to school. The state presence, which was brought about by Balarabe Musa when he became governor, he built a ginger factory not far from my village. But if you remember, Balarabe Musa was impeached. And since his impeachment, that ginger factory remained where it started out. I'm making the point because every day when I wake up, I have to pinch myself and remain eternally grateful to God. For my parents, because they gave birth to me, but to my teachers. Because in northern Nigeria, the pagan areas which constitute most of the Middle Belt had to rely on missionaries. So for example, the first school to be built, which is where President Buhari went to, the school in Katsina, 1921. When that school was built, subsequently another school was built, and so it became known as Kaduna College. Kaduna was more or less a pagan area, so the school was actually called Kaduna College, but it was in Zaria. Zaria is where the emir lives. And then in 1949, the school became known as Barewa College, which is where a lot of the big boys who constitute what used to be called jokingly the Kaduna Mafia came from. The other significant development in northern Nigeria was when Kefi College was built in 1968. Now I'm telling you these stories because it is interesting that from Zaria to Kefi, then about 350 kilometers. But the colonial government still traveled all that distance because between Zaria, Kaduna was a town of Bagi people who were considered pagan people. And they went through all that distance to Kefi because there was an emir in Kefi, there was an emir in Zaria, there was an emir in Katsina. So I'm saying this not to make anybody feel a victim or whatever, but to say that education is what has enabled us to roll back a future that would have been non-existent. We know that today people didn't have a chance to go to school because they were poor. They didn't have a chance to go to school because they were women. Nigeria is a patriarchal society where to be a man is more important than to be a woman. And today in the university, if a woman does well in the university, men, if she gets a first class, it must be checked properly. She must have been sleeping with the lecturers. Even in the social dynamics of the home, first child is a girl, second child is a girl, third child is a girl, fourth child is a boy, the reaction of parents will be different, especially the father. And as a result, mother and three sisters are supposed to more or less worship two men, even if the man is still, no matter how small he is. But we have now realized, and we are realizing, and Nigeria is coming to the table very late and reluctantly too. Because women are saying we want 30%, although my argument about 30% is slightly different from the argument of the women. I don't want to go into those details. I am fully in support of women getting 30% power in Nigeria. But my argument is that it cannot be the same women whose husbands are already holding power in Abuja and across the country. Okay? Because I do not see the justice for you to tell me, okay? You cannot tell me that, and this is nothing personal, it is the reality, that the Igbos and the Yorubas and the Fulanis and the Hausas who are already holding power, that they will bring their wives and their mistresses and their daughters to become ministers and senators and so on. If you are going to do 40% or 30%, that 30% must go to women who represent communities that are not represented at all. So it is not about just saying any woman at all. And this is not, there must be discrimination in favor of injustice that has been institutionalized. But until recently, we are still battling with the whole idea of whether women should go to school. Today, I had to look up the biography of the late Professor Okonjo, the father of who, you know who. My friend, my papa, Justice Oputa, after his retirement, after we finished Oputa panel, he was in his 80s. And we used to talk a lot. One day he said to me, he said, "Father, this world is not a fair world. Look at me. See how far I went to the Supreme Court. One of the most respected justices. I know that myself." He said, "But my little boy, Charles, when he was a child, the teachers would look at him and say, 'Your name is Charles Oputa?' 'Yes.' 'You are the son of Oputa?' They say, 'Yes.' Even teacher will bow down." He said, "But now people look at me, I'm over 80, they say, 'Oh Lord, yeah, Justice Oputa, father of a Charlie boy.' Then yeah. I'm now famous for being father of Charlie boy, not for being Justice of the Supreme Court of Nigeria." But it gets even more bizarre. When the father of Chimamanda died, Professor Adichie, one of the most illustrious professors, University Nigeria, Nsukka, a professor of statistics from the University of Berkeley in the United States of America. They did not say that Professor Adichie had died. They said Professor Adichie, the father of Chimamanda, so that you will understand. In the same way, when I looked up Dr. Ngozi Iweala's father's profile, I found it very interesting. When he too died, they didn't mention that he was holding a prestigious traditional title as the Obi of Ugwashuku. No. They didn't even mention that a man who, if that man in the 50s and was already, he was a professor of mathematics. All that one they didn't mention. They just the highlight is father of Ngozi Iweala. So if you want your name to be remembered, though, better make sure that your daughter is in school and in a good school. But that now, really, the challenge for us is how do we mediate education? Because there's been a lot of criticism about education in Africa, about the fact that we are often, let me say, we are often thinking in vernacular and speaking in English. Okay? Because whenever we are talking, there will come to a point you say, you know, as we say in Ishan, but you can't translate, you can't find the words in English. You are thinking in Ishan, you're trying to speak English. Professor Bob Fafunwa made the point when he was minister, even before he became minister, one of our most illustrious educationists. He made the point that unless a child mediates education through what we call the traditional native tongue, or whatever, the education is likely to be truncated. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, the writer, Kenyan writer, after some time, way back in the 80s, or late 80s or early 90s, stopped writing in English completely and started writing in Kikuyu. But the point can be made over and over. What are the best institutions, means of teaching our children? It is important because there is a joke about those days in primary school where the teacher used to write on the blackboard. It was written on top of the board permanently. It was never meant to be cleaned. Speak English only. Speak English only. And the children were told that if anybody speaks vernacular, you report the person to the teacher. And you got 6 lashes for speaking vernacular. So one day, and the children internalized this. One day the teacher came to class, and one child raised his hand before the teacher could start teaching. He says, I have a report, sir. I have a report. Teacher said, yes. He said, my friend, John, he spoke vernacular, sir. So the teacher now called him, brought out the kid. John was crying. Sir, I can swear to God, I've not said anything to anybody since I entered this class. Then the one who accused him said, it is not true, sir. Then the teacher turned around and said, did anybody hear John speak vernacular? The class said no. Then the guy who accused him said, sir, he didn't speak vernacular, but he laughed in vernacular, sir. And then the teacher said, okay, that's fine, okay, calm down. The teacher said, he laughed in vernacular. He said, yes. What happened? He said, you know, Tunde here, sitting here, was telling the story, and then he just started laughing. He said, he was throwing up his hands. So the teacher became interested, and the teacher said, and they had a parish priest who was the only Englishman, the only white man. So the teacher said, so what he said, he should have laughed in vernacular, sir. Laugh in vernacular. The teacher said, how do you laugh in vernacular? He said, you know, sir, he should have said, ha, 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 ha. Because the priest who was there was an old man, and whenever he had to laugh, like, ha, ha, ha. The young man thought that is how to laugh in English. So the challenge is that for us, we're still battling with the issues of what is the language of mediation. Because education is nothing other than, there are elements of indoctrination, although indoctrination has become a bad word. But it's not necessarily a bad word. In the book of Joel, chapter 1, verse 3, Joel says to the people, tell your children of it. It's God's doing. Tell your children. And let your children tell their children. And let their children tell the next generation. Joel chapter 1, verse 3. So education is a system of the transmission of knowledge. What kind of knowledge do we transmit? That is the critical question. And then he speaks to the issue of the quality of containers and the quality of transmission. You might have wonderful water that you want to supply to people. But if the pipes are not in good shape, or you might try to supply electricity, what if the cables are not in good shape? But even more dramatic is what Moses said to the children of Israel about why and how it was important for them to remain faithful by appreciating history, by appreciating God's goodness to them and where they had come from. And Moses said in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 5 to 8, he says, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Now listen very carefully. These words I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand and as a sign on your forehead. You shall write them on the doorposts of your houses and your gates. And this is what, when you talk about education and culture, because our environment and society has become so disrupted. Because many of us who are in our 50s and 60s look back at those days nostalgically. All of us sitting here can go back to our former schools, whether they are primary, whether they are secondary, whether they are university. And we know that what they are now is far from what they were during our time. So something has gone wrong. Culturally, many of us can see very clearly, whether you call the respect for elders, whether you call the very fact that, you know, we couldn't call our mother by name, we couldn't call our parents by name. We knew how to greet our parents. But today, my friend was complaining to me, a friend of mine, whose children are living in America. He himself is in America. He said he just called one of his daughters, who is married. He said, I'm coming from Houston to come and see you in New York. Please, I want to eat a goosey soup. So the girl told him, he said, yeah, you can come, but if you're coming, you want to eat a goosey soup? Well, I'm sorry, you got to bring it yourself because we don't cook. So there are things we are seeing that we didn't dream of, and we're going to be challenged even more. So the point I'm making is that history needs to be consistent. Certain values need to be properly anchored. People accuse the Catholic Church, and they are probably right. They say the Catholic Church is orthodox. It is conservative. But you have a choice. Either you are conserving a truth or you are conserving ignorance. But there must be a rock-solid virtue that is not subjected to the vagaries or interpretations of ordinary mortals. So what do we think of education today? Well, the key performance indicators that we are always very serious to talk about are five. We are looking at, is like what they say about computers, software and hardware. Many parents are focusing on the hardware. So, and schools are getting glossier and glossier. Externally, they look beautiful, they look fanciful. And the higher the fees, the more parents will go. Because people believe that there must be something there. Indeed, Ngugi Bationgo published a little book in which he made the point. He said, in Kenya, if a white woman decided to go to to sit under a tree, and she puts up a signboard saying that a new school has been registered, that Kenyan parents will take their children there because they will say that as long as it is said by a white woman, there must have been some new thing that white people have discovered about the value and the virtue of learning under trees, and they'll be more than happy to take their children. So people feel, you know, in Nigeria, if you say, for example, you open a restaurant and you say to Nigerians, this restaurant, to enter, you must first of all pay 50,000 naira before you enter. Don't be saying you go see Chopo, pay 50,000 before you enter. The big people will say, very good, wonderful. At least all these rascal people will not go see them. People will still go. Like the story of a man who got a big contract in Abuja. It's a really big contract. So he decided to go to church, to go and pray to God before going to Abuja to finish signing the papers. He entered the church and saw one poor man. Poor man was rolling on the ground and crying, God, please, rainy season is coming. Please help me. Just 5,000 naira, make a buy fertilizer. I don't want to steal. I don't want to steal. I'm strong. Because at that time, bag of cement was 1,000 naira. I just want to buy enough to farm. So the man had this poor man. He just went, brought out 5,000 naira, touched the man, gave him 5,000. The man opened, counted 5,000 and started running and dancing inside the church. He danced. As he come out for church, The man adjusted his babariga. He said, God, now that this poor man has gone, can I have your undivided attention? Okay? Now I want to tell you what my problem is. This poor man has gone. So there are many of us who are looking for schools where ordinary people's children are not there. We don't want our children to be contaminated. I have seen many parents send me photographs of their children, part of the Nigerian elite. My child is studying in England. He's the only black man in the class. A black man, that is an achievement. Child is the only black person. Now, the focus is on student achievement, student discipline, student attendance, and so on. We have all this, but the critical question we must ask ourselves is, what values are our children taking away? All of us here can say, sorry, I think I'm fine. Yeah, it's my fault. You know, I come from Sokoto, which is, you can understand why I can't function well with the technology in Benin. So please, just be patient with me. We get microphone, but our own no reach like this. So please, make una no vex. What are the values that our children, they can get wonderful certificates. That is the hardware. But the software, which is internal, which is made up of a composite of values, the kind of values that can enable a child to function and make the right moral choices, whether their parents are present or not present.